वासुदेवाय नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवया भगवती उत्तमा श्लोके भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठिकी Chapter 7, Bhagavad as it is, Chapter 7, text number 28. येषां तु अन्तगतं पापं येषां तु अन्तगतं पापं जनानां पुण्य कर्मणां जनानां पुण्यकर्मणां ते द्वन्द्व मोह निर्मुक्ताः ते द्वन्द्व मोह निर्मुक्ता भजन्ते मां दृढव्रताः येषां तु अन्तगतं पापं जनानां पुण्यकर्मणां ते द्वन्द्वमोह निर्मुक्ता भजन्ते मां दृढव्रताः येषां तु अन्तगतं पापं जनानां पुण्यकर्मणां ते द्वन्द्वमोह निर्मुक्ता भजन्ते मां दृढव्रताः येषां तु अन्तगतं पापं जनानां पुण्यकर्मणां ते द्वन्द्वमोह निर्मुक्ता भजन्ते मां दृढव्रताः
येषां तु अन्तगतं पापं जनानां पुण्यकर्मणां ते द्वन्द्वमोह निर्मुक्ता भजन्ते मां दृढव्रतः येषां तु अन्तगतं पापं जनानां पुण्यकर्मणां ते द्वन्द्वमोह निर्मुक्ता भजन्ते मां दृढव्रतः
येषां तु अन्तगतं पापं जनानां पुण्यकर्मणां ते द्वन्द्वमोह निर्मुक्ता भजन्ते मां दृढव्रतः
येषां तु अन्तगतं पापं
येषां तु अन्तगतं पापं
जनानां पुण्यकर्मणां
जनानां पुण्यकर्मणां
ते द्वन्द्वमोहनिर्मुक्ता
ते द्वन्द्वमोहनिर्मुक्ता
भजन्ति मां दृढव्रतः
भजन्ते मां दृढव्रताः। Online. येषां तु अन्तगतं पापं जनानां पुण्यकर्मणां ते द्वन्द्वमोहनिर्मुक्ता भजन्ते मां दृढव्रताः। येषां whose to but antagatam completely eradicated papam sin jananam of the persons punya pious karmanam previous activities they dvandva duality moha delusion nirmuktaha free from bhajante worship mam me dridhavrataha with determination. Translation purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, whose sinful actions are completely eradicated and who are free from the duality of delusion, engage themselves in my service with determination. Translation with repetition. Persons who have acted piously in previous lives and in this life, whose sinful actions are completely eradicated and who are free from the duality of delusion, engage themselves in my service with determination. Perfect, Srila Prabhupada. Those eligible for elevation to the transcendental position are mentioned in this verse. For those who are sinful, atheistic, foolish, and deceitful, it is very difficult to transcend the duality of desire and hate. Only those who have passed their lives in practicing the regulative principles of religion, who have acted piously and have conquered sinful reactions, can accept devotional service and gradually rise to the pure knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then, gradually they can meditate in trance on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the process of being situated on the spiritual platform. This elevation is possible in Krishna consciousness, in the association of pure devotees who can deliver one from delusion. It is stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam that if one actually wants to be liberated, he must render service to the devotees. But one who associates with materialistic people is on the path leading to the darkest region of existence. All the devotees of the Lord traverse this earth just to recover the conditioned souls from their delusion. The impersonalists do not know that forgetting their constitutional position as subordinate to the Supreme Lord is the greatest violation of God's law. Unless one is reinstated in his own constitutional position, it is not possible to understand the Supreme Personality or to be fully engaged in his transcendental love and service with determination. Thus ends the Transcendental Bhaktivedanta purport. Om Ajnanatimidandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prishnaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashyata Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So we are almost towards the end of this chapter 7, that is knowledge of the absolute. And there are 2 more verses after this, and that will be the conclusion of this chapter. So, as we saw in the very first verse, how should one attain to the highest absolute knowledge? What is the process? That is by hearing about the Lord, by being in yoga, by fixing one's mind in Lord. But as we have been seeing in the last few sections of this chapter, as how there are different kinds of people. There are 4 kinds of pious people, 4 kinds of people who do not take to the devotional path. And then we saw how there are people who consider impersonalism to be highest, or people who think demigod worship is to be highest. So in this way, we have been seeing there are different kinds of people taking to different kinds of worships and different kinds of methods. But in this verse, Lord is now stating that who are those people who can actually be firmly fixed in devotional service. And so just to recap what was discussed in the last class, the verse stated what is the prime reason for a living entity to come to this material world. So as we saw in the last verse, Ichha and Dvesha, desire and hate. So Ichha Dvesha Samuttena Dvandvamohena Bharata Sarva Bhutani Sammoham Sarge Yanti Parantapa. So we saw that every living entity, as soon as he comes to the material world, he is born with delusion. He is in delusion. And the dualities of desire and hate. So we saw the different meanings of desire and hate. That is, one wants to lord over the material nature, enjoy independently of the Lord, or one is envious of the Supreme Lord. And therefore, one is given an opportunity to be in this material world and to be in delusion. Now, as we saw, delusion means to be fixed in a belief that is not true. And here also in this verse, the word Dvandva Moha. So every living entity who is born in this material world is faced with this challenge of duality, Dvandva. So sometimes someone thinks this is right, sometimes someone thinks this is wrong. Sometimes someone thinks this is in my interest. After some time, they think this is not in my interest. So actually, it is very difficult to understand what is right, what is wrong, what is good for me, what is not good for me, how should I act. This duality is very difficult for people to overcome. That's why we will see many people are lost, not able to make sense of the world as what is right and what is wrong. And therefore, sometimes they go to religious institutions, sometimes they don't want to be in religious institutions. Sometimes they want to become atheists, sometimes they want to become agnostics. In this way, people are always perplexed in one or the other thing. And duality and then delusion. So from these dualities, in this world of various kinds of dualities, the delusion even increases. So sometimes one is falsely thinking that, oh, maybe this is not right, so I'll go to the other thing. Not because the other thing is correct. It's just because I do not know what is correct and what is wrong. When I see something to be wrong, I think maybe anything else apart from that is actually right. Just like I was talking to someone today morning, and he was talking about how he does not want to associate with any religious organization. Why? Because he thinks religious organization means there is some kind of trouble. So this is a kind of delusion. So in this way, there are different kinds of delusions that people undergo. So sometimes they think something to be something else, and they mistake completely. Similarly, in this world, to actually be able to discern what is the true thing, right thing to do, what is actual truth, is very, very difficult for people to understand. And most often, people are engrossed in these dualities of delusion. And here, the Lord is saying that who are those who can actually render service to Him with determination? Bhajante mam dridavata. Dridavata means determination. And even to worship the Lord is not an easy thing. To worship the Lord with determination is even rare to find. So, who are those people who are not only rendering devotional service to the Lord, but also that they are able to do it with great determination? So, there are three characteristics that have been mentioned of people who are able to do such devotional service unto the Lord. And the Lord is saying the first characteristic is antagatam papam. So, those people who have completely eradicated their sinful acts. So, Prabhupada translates, whose sinful actions are completely eradicated. So, no more sinful activities. They recognize the sinful activities and they no more perform sinful activities. The second criteria that is being talked about is that those persons should also janana punya karmana. They must also be doing pious activities. And Prabhupada is stating, and in fact, the Lord is Prabhupada is translating karmanam, previous activities. And in the translation, Prabhupada is saying not only in the previous life, but even in this life. So they must be performing the pious activities, punya karmanam. And they should be freed from sinful actions. They must be performing pious activities, and they must be freed from dvandva moha. So dvandva moha nirmukta means they have to be freed from these dualities and delusion. As long as one is perplexed by these dualities and delusion, one cannot fix one's mind unto the supreme truth or unto devotion service. So when one is able to do these three things, one is able to render devotional service by determination. Now, in the purport, Prabhupada begins by saying, those eligible for elevation to the transcendental position are mentioned in this verse. So, it is important to note that usually, as we saw in this previous verse, as soon as people are born, they're born to delusion. People are born with certain conditioning. So, in this state of being, as soon as the living entity is born, living entity is bewildered by this material world, unable to figure out what is the right thing, what is truth. So, also because the living entity does not know how to act in this material world, by nature, this living entity, because of the tendency to enjoy, because the living entity wants to enjoy independent of the Supreme Lord, the living entity is put into a specific condition where one is forgetful of the Supreme Lord. And as soon as one is forgetful of the Supreme Lord, one is brought into this material atmosphere. And in this material atmosphere, the living entity falsely tries to think that I want to become a big person. By becoming big, I can enjoy. So every living entity wants to become a big businessman, a big engineer, a big scientist, big scholar, so on and so forth. In different categories, people want to become big. And the hope in becoming big is that they can enjoy this world. And every living entity is bewildered by this desire to lord over. Now, this is said to be a living entity who is considering that this material happiness is all in all, and who is actually surrounded with material modes of nature, is actually said to be not in transcendental position, but in material platform. So there is spiritual platform or transcendental position, and the opposite to that is the material platform. So Prabhupada states that, as we also see in Bhagavad Gita, that even the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Shudras, so-called categorization, these are also based upon the different kinds of modes of material nature one is absorbed in. So one, if is in the mode of goodness, he can be said to be a Brahmana. But if one is influenced so much by passion, he is to be a Kshatriya is too much influenced, is in the mode of passion. Vaishya, mode of passion and ignorance. the Shudra completely in the mode of ignorance. So in this way, Prabhupada states that every living entity is in some kind of a prisoner. Either one is a first-class prisoner, second-class prisoner, third-class prisoner, or a fourth-class prisoner. But everyone is a prisoner. No one is free from this influence of the modes of material nature. And these modes of material nature bind the living entity very tightly, conditions the living entity. And as soon as the living entity is conditioned by the modes of material nature, the living entity forgets one's own constitutional position, forgets what is to be done, what is not to be done. And this Prabhupada in various places explains about this material platform. So, and Prabhupada says that the material platform is characterized by ignorance. So one common thread in all the phases of material platform of existence is that one is not really aware of things as they are. One is in ignorance. And Prabhupada says, because of this ignorance, another associated quality that people have is enviousness. So as soon as one is in the material platform, one is envious of other. If one is doing something big, one becomes very disturbed. And one becomes very happy when one is not doing very well. So this is the natural tendency in the material platform. On the other hand, Prabhupada says, the Vaishnava is one who is not envious, because on the spiritual platform, he is not at all envious. And another characteristics of being in material platform or material position is that no one is satisfied. Everyone is disturbed. Because as we see, Sada Samit Vignatiyam Asad Grahat. So as soon as one is accepting this material world, material position, material things to be actually permanent, and he's thinking that it is these things that I need to enjoy, and these are mine, and I am mine. So when one is driven by these conceptions of life on the material platform, immediately there is an anxiety. So anyone who is in the material platform, he has to undergo various tribulations, the different kinds of material miseries, the different kinds of anxieties, struggle. Another characteristic of being in material life or material platform, Prabhupada says, is that one is too much engaged in eating, sleeping, making, and defending. So this is another characteristic Prabhupada says, is that people who are only interested in these things, they are deeply in material life. And Prabhupada says that as one progresses in spiritual path, these four basic necessities of life, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, they have to be reduced. In fact, Prabhupada says, at least they have to be regulated. So as one is making a regulation in these terms, that means he is slowly moving towards the spiritual position. And immediately Prabhupada, so this distinction that we must recognize that as living entities, we are naturally in a material platform. We have a material vision towards the world. Driven by those vision of the material world and not having the vision of the spiritual world, we are always performing activities on material platform. And activities on material platform, either good or bad, pious or impious, they are not actually freeing us from this modes of material nature. And therefore, we are not able to reach to the transcendental position. And therefore, we must recognize this material platform, the existence on the material platform or material position is not the right position, is not the best position. It is the position of suffering. And therefore, there has to be an elevation. Elevation means something higher. So the higher state of existence, the higher way of living life is to come to the transcendental position. And Prabhupada is mentioning that this verse is talking about who is eligible to reach to that transcendental position. And that is very nicely described. And Prabhupada is beginning by explaining who is not actually eligible or who cannot actually go to that transcendental position. So for those who are sinful, who wants to act against perform activities which does not take one closer to the God, performing activities which are not authorized. Atheistic, complete disregard of the Supreme Lord. Foolish, as we saw, the Muda, the four kinds of people who do not want to surrender to the Supreme Lord because they want they're captivated by Maya, working hard, foolishly, and people who are deceitful, who are having a tendency to cheat. This tendency to cheat is all around. People want to be deceitful in either gross or subtle way. Just like today, I was hearing from someone else as how, in the name of taking donations, in the name of doing something religious, how some people are cheating some other people. So in this way, especially in Kali Yuga, the tendency to cheat is all prevalent. It's very difficult, even in the garb of a dress of a Swami, in the dress of a spiritual leader, people try to deceive, cheat people. But these people may be able to cheat some people for some time, but actually they cannot overcome the laws of material nature. They cannot cheat the law. They cannot overcome the laws of material nature. They forget to understand that they will be able to overcome the laws of material nature. And Prabhupada is saying it is very difficult to transcend the duality of desire and hate. So these people they cannot overcome the dualities of desire and hate and reach to a transcendental position. So these category of people can never reach. Then Prabhupada is going on to explain that who are these people or what kind of people can actually move forward in the direction of transcendental position. Only those who have passed their lives in practicing the regulative principles of religion, who have acted piously and have conquered sinful reactions, can accept devotional service and gradually rise to the pure knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So to come to the transcendental position, it is important to note that we cannot come to the perfect transcendental position without being in touch with the Supreme Lord. So we need to be connected with the Supreme Lord, who is all pure, who is all transcendental. Only when we associate with Him, then we can actually come to the transcendental position. But even to come to understand who the Lord is, it's not an easy thing. And here it has been said, one who have passed their lives in practicing the regulative principles of religion. There are so many rules and regulations, there are so many do's and don'ts the religious scriptures prescribe. And one may be doing these activities for many, many lives and having acted piously and also avoiding sinful reactions, one may come to the point of devotional service. So even to come to the point of devotional service is very, very rare. It's not very easy. So one way of coming to that position is that one accumulates a lot of pious credits by following the regulative principles of religion and avoiding the sinful activities. The four basic sinful activities is meat eating, intoxication, gambling, and illicit sex. So unless one does not avoid these sinful activities and does not follow the regulative principles, acting whimsically on one's own interest, one's own thinking this is good, this is right, whatever comes to my mind, that's the only way to function, then they cannot actually come or accept devotional service. So here Prabhupada is saying, after accepting devotional service, when one gradually starts performing devotional service, then one gradually progresses, as we see at the Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya, Anartha Nivritti. So in this way, there are different stages of devotional life by which one makes further progress. So it is important to note that this word determination is very important for a practitioner who has come to the point of devotional service. Prabhupada explains the word determination in different places, in very different contexts. Prabhupada, one common definition of determination Prabhupada says is that one should carry on with the devotional activities in spite of different kinds of impediments. So there will be different situations where one will be tested. Sometimes our ideas will not be accepted. Sometimes there will be unfavorable circumstances. And there can be various reasons which may appear to hinder our execution of devotional service. And we see this quite often, just like we see a certain external reason as a means to not perform a certain devotional service. But determination means, Prabhupada says, that one has to tolerate, one has to move forward despite the so-called difficulties that come around during devotional service. And the beautiful example is Prabhupada himself, as how, with great determination, he crossed over the ocean to come to the United States. So there is no one to help Prabhupada. Materially speaking, there is just a small, in fact, when Prabhupada lands, I think the customs officer or someone comes and asks Prabhupada, how long do you want to stay? I think Prabhupada says just 2 months or a couple of months. And he wasn't sure because he doesn't have the sponsorship for long. He thought 1 month of sponsorship is there in Gopal Agarwal's home, and maybe 1 more month he would be able to manage some way, but he was not sure what to do afterwards. And so he says maybe 2 months and a couple of months. But Prabhupada's dependency upon the Lord and his rendering of devotional service was never hampered by the external circumstances. Prabhupada continued with faith in the Supreme Lord. And Prabhupada says, after 2 months, it got extended, and it became 1 year. After that, they said, no, you have to renew the visa. Our devotees are also undergoing some process of renewing their visas and things. So there may be so-called temporary obstacles, but people, especially Prabhupada says, who are in the beginning stages of devotional life, they get shaken up. They either give up or they lose faith in the devotional process. Well, I'm running devotional service, but why are difficulties coming to me? Or maybe I'm not supposed to do this devotional service because not everything is favorable. But Prabhupada says, no, that's actually devotees who are elevated. They see this so-called difficulties as the mercy of the Lord. They see, because of their own past mistakes, that they're undergoing the struggles. Or it is actually the mercy of the Lord that the Lord is testing their faith and Lord wants to give his mercy. So in this process, sometimes he may test the devotees. So when devotees undergo various kinds of struggles, so-called impediments, one must still move forward with determination. One should not be worried about the results and not execute the devotional service. Most often, one of the common problems that especially devotees in the beginning stages face is the syndrome of the result. So much of focus on result that they fail to do the act of devotional service. Because devotional service in itself is complete. The idea of the result that, oh, this numbers, that all those things are the criteria for success of a devotional service is not true. Actually, just the opportunity to run a devotional service itself is a success. And if one is able to really run a devotional service in the right mood, in order to please the devotees, the authorities, Guru and Krishna, that itself is a success. And that itself is such a great success because even to get an opportunity of rendering devotional service is so rare. In an ocean of this material world, for someone to give us a devotional service is a great fortune for us. And by being engaged in that devotional service, we can come to this transcendental position. But where can we get such an opportunity? So even just getting an opportunity by the mercy of the devotees, Prabhupada and Krishna, you must be very, very grateful. And if you execute that with sincerity, with determination, let me put my best, then immediately that service becomes even more joyful, even more relishable. So this is very important. By rendering the devotional service in right way, we actually rise in our stages of devotional life. As we move further, we see that we are able to understand, as Prabhupada says here, gradually rise to the pure knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is a process. So sometimes one may in the beginning say, yes, may be very impatient. Oh, why am I not able to be perfect? Prabhupada says, just like a child who is trying to walk may fall down sometimes, may not be able to make all the steps very well. So similarly, in the beginning of the devotional life, one may not be able to realize the absolute knowledge to perfection, or be able to do the devotional service with all love and things like that. But still, the process that is given must be carried out. And in fact, as we will see, what is the easiest process by which actually we can make rapid advancement and come to this transcendental position. So once as one makes, like today I was meeting Gyan Prabhu, and he was reading, I asked him to read a verse from Bhagavad Gita, and he was reading verse from 2nd chapter, and then he described a little bit from the verse, and then I asked him, so what needs to be done? So he said, I should contemplate. So I said, why do you think so? Because the Lord has asked to, one can control the material senses by focusing one's consciousness upon the Lord. So he made this statement and then he said, I should contemplate. Then I said, what should you contemplate? He said, whatever comes to my mind, or I'll try to contemplate on my own. So actually, we cannot contemplate the right thing in our current state of life. Our contemplation will be driven by the things that are moving around us in this world. And therefore, as it is said, to meditate in trance in the Supreme Personality of Godhead is not possible by our random contemplation. But the contemplation is possible when we hear about the Supreme Lord in the scriptures, when we chant Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So when we gradually hear the words of the spiritual master from the scriptures, when we understand about the Transcendental Kingdom, the Supreme Lord, His activities, His holy name. So when we hear these things, then we can develop what to contemplate on. When we contemplate on these transcendental words that are coming from the lotus mouth of the spiritual master, from the mouth of the Lord in the form of the scriptures, and the great devotees. So when we hear these things, those are the things that we need to meditate. So unless we don't meditate on those things, we cannot get closer or be in contact with all Supreme Lord, who is all transcendental, and come to the transcendental position. And Prabhupada is saying, this is the process of being situated in transcendental spiritual platform. So as one is starting to meditate in trance in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then that is a process of spiritual, that is a process of being situated on the spiritual platform. And Srila Rupa Goswami says in another place that the Supreme Lord, His name, His activities, His form, all these things are non-different. Because the Lord is absolute, so is all paraphernalia, His name, fame, activities are all absolute. So even if one is absorbed in one of these things, if one is associating with one of these, then immediately he is on a spiritual platform. Actually, in another place, in glorifying the glories of the holy name, it is said that the Lord is present in the transcendental vibration. Because the Lord is present in the transcendental vibration, anyone who is hearing transcendental vibration, this holy name of Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, immediately all these material turbulences of fear, anxiety, material attachment, they all vanquish. Because the Lord is present in the transcendental vibration, and as soon as one is associating with the Lord, who is all pure, who is all free from all mundane material inebrities, as soon as one is doing that, there is all peace, there is all happiness, there is freedom from all unwanted material things. So that association with the Supreme Lord, that is what. So when we learn from the spiritual master how to associate with the Supreme Lord, then we can immediately come to the spiritual platform. And how do we associate with the Lord? How do we learn? Who is the Lord? What are these attributes? How we can associate with Him? Then that's explained by Prabhupada in the next few lines. This elevation is possible in Krishna consciousness, in the association of pure devotees who can deliver one from delusion. So sometimes people may think, by my own endeavors, I will try to understand. There are scriptures, there are commentaries. I'll read, if not one commentary, another commentary, just like sometimes students, they try to read. If they don't understand one author, they try to go to another author and think that maybe I choose one or the other author that makes sense of some subject. But that is not the way to understand the Supreme Lord, but the way to associate with the Supreme Lord. This is possible in the association of pure devotees who can deliver one from delusion. So the association of the pure devotees is an essential principle for one who wants to come to this transcendental platform. Because the pure devotees are always in this transcendental platform. Simply their presence itself evokes that, just like it is said, that the fire, although it is dormant in the wood, but when there is the real fire that comes in contact with that wood in which there is dormant fire, the wood becomes fiery or gets the fire. Similarly, a pure devotee of the Lord who is perfect in his consciousness, who is fully in Krishna consciousness, as soon as one comes in contact with such a pure devotee of the Lord, our dormant consciousness, which is also Krishna consciousness, starts to fire up or start. It starts to evoke that real consciousness. So this association of pure devotees is a significant principle, without which it is not possible to associate with the Supreme Lord. That's why we can also see in Srimad Bhagavatam there is mention that how even when Parvati, when Shiva is instructing Parvati, he's telling how worship of the devotees is even more higher than the worship of the Lord Himself. So therefore, as we see, saying Yasya Prasadat Bhagavad Prasado, Yasya Prasadam Nagati Kutobi. So without receiving the blessings, without receiving the mercy of the pure devotee of the Lord, it is not possible to receive the mercy of the Supreme Lord. So so that's why we have to remember the spiritual master 3 times a day, glorify him, offer obeisance unto him 3 times a day. So that's why we have this process by which we worship the spiritual master, because it is by his mercy, as we also sing this wonderful prayer, Shri Guru Charana Padma, Kevala Bhakti Satma, the lotus feet of the spiritual master at the abode of pure devotional service. So how do we obtain this pure devotional service? This is not by mundane speculation. By mundane speculation or some kind of karma kanda, one cannot come to pure devotional service. You see, it has been said, the lotus feet of the spiritual master is the abode of pure devotional service. So it is with him, he can give us that pure devotional service. And it is through, and how do we make advancement? How do we actually make very rapid advancement to come to this platform of transcendental equation? Is Guru Mukha Padna Vakya Chetate Koriyaksha Arina Koryo Manayamsha. Make the teachings emanating from the lotus mouth of our spiritual master one with your heart, and do not desire anything else. Attachment to his lotus feet of the spiritual master is the best means of spiritual advancement. So if you want to make the best advancement in spiritual life, we have to make the teachings that are coming from the lotus mouth of the spiritual master to be our own desires. And it is also important not to desire anything else. As we saw in the last class, how this tendency of desire can lead us to different places. And it's very difficult to actually ascertain what is the right desire I should have. Because it is from desire that we perform activities. And as we saw in the last class, everyone is born in delusion. So a man who is in ignorance and delusion, how can he desire anything appropriate? But everyone is so attached to one's own desire that one wants to be so adamant to perform activities which are pleasing to him, which are his own desires. But in this way, we make very little advancement. But if we take to the desires of the spiritual master, if we take to his instructions to be our heart, to our heart, then we make very rapid advancement. We are freed from this material contaminations very quickly. And it is by his desires, by his mercy, all desires for spiritual perfection are fulfilled. So simply by his mercy. So this is a very important principle, that how do we obtain the mercy of a pure devotee of the Lord? This should be very thickly ingrained, because simply somewhere or other, if one receives the mercy of a pure devotee of the Lord, immediately one makes rapid advancement, as we see in the case of Narada Muni. He was just doing very little small menial services to the Bhaktivedantists who have come to stay there for the 4 months of Chaturmasya. Just a normal boy, not having so-called great parentage, no education, no beauty, and so on and so forth, but just engaged in the service. And somehow he is able to please those Bhaktivedantists. So that is very important. And Prabhupada is elaborating that point further here. It is stated in the Srimad Bhagavatam that if one actually wants to be liberated, he must render service to the devotees. So without rendering service to the pure devotees of the Lord and to the devotees, it is not possible to make advancement in spiritual life. This rendering of service is so important. And to understand the right way to render service. Service means to be able to please. So it is very important when we render service, we must be always cautious and conscious whether am I pleasing the devotees, the authorities, the spiritual master and the Lord. Am I doing in their interest, or am I doing with my own other interests? Because my own other interest means karma, and doing something else apart from what is the assigned service, that is speculation. So unless I'm not very carefully guarded from my own karma and jnana nishta bhakti that is coming into devotional service, I will not be completely in the transcendental platform. On the other hand, as there are do's and don'ts, one has to be also careful of doing things which does not take one to the path of transcendental position or the spiritual platform. And here it has been mentioned, one who associates with materialistic people is on the path leading to the darkest region of existence. So while we are making our steps in this process of going towards situated on a spiritual platform, it is also important that we recognize which are the paths which are leading to the material platforms. And all such association has to be avoided. And one such important impediment is to associate with people who are after women, who are after money. Therefore, one easy way to understand how are we making progress in our spiritual life is also to see what kind of association am I seeking. That is a simple parameter. As it is said, the water and fire, they cannot come together. Similarly, one who is in the mode of ignorance and other in the mode of goodness, they will feel uncomfortable. Because the person in the mode of goodness may want things to happen in a certain way, want certain cleanliness, and so on and so forth. But the person in the mode of ignorance may not be interested in any of those things. So similarly, where is our association? Where are we seeking association? That is a very important principle. And as much as we are engaged in the association of devotees rendering service, we are naturally away from association which are filled with materialistic people. Because everywhere in this world around, people are engrossed deeply in material pursuits and enjoyments. So this is a great opportunity, a place like temple, because it provides such a wonderful protection for the living entity not to be associated with something which is unwanted. and therefore this is like an oasis in a desert. So this is the wonderful gift of Srila Prabhupada and devotees who are making these wonderful temples. And these are the places where there's an opportunity to render service. And there's an opportunity even more to render service to pure devotee of the Lord. So such a blessing is this place. As soon as someone comes and makes contact, begins small devotional service. As we saw how a bum in New York City, and Prabhupada was giving a class, he goes and changes a toilet paper. That was the beginning of his devotional service, and how Prabhupada appreciates him, for that small service. So somewhere or the other, if someone comes and even renders a small devotional service to a pure devotee of the Lord, his journey to the path of liberation is wide open. Mahat Seva Ahur Dwar Vimuktes. So that the path to liberation, simply by coming and going down to a pure devotee, to Shri God in time, and getting the blessings, that itself is the beginning of the journey. And it is very important to see the significance of the devotees. That all the devotees of the Lord traverse this earth just to recover the conditioned souls from the delusion. So it is not possible for a living entity to come out of this delusion without the mercy or without coming in contact with the pure devotee. Everyone else is perplexed. Even in understanding what is devotional service and what is not devotional service, what is mixed devotional service, what is pure devotional service. There may be many people who may be chanting, there may be many people who may be performing various religious activities, but to completely get over this delusion is not possible. They may seemingly appear to be religious, as that is pious activities for sure. But to completely get over the delusion, only a pure devotee is perfectly situated. Only by his mercy, through his teachings, through his Vani, following his instruction, that one can actually overcome this delusion. The impersonalists do not know that forgetting their constitutional position as subordinate to the Supreme Lord is the greatest violation of God's law. Unless one is reinstated in his own constitutional position, it is not possible to understand the Supreme Personality or be fully engaged in his transcendental loving service with determination. So even as Prabhupada is saying, there are other class of spiritualists who think that they are able to achieve liberation. But it is being said here that unless one does not come to this understanding of one's subordinate position to the Supreme Lord, it is not possible for one to overcome, one cannot actually get true liberation. And therefore, in fact, the other day in the class, one of the classes I was attending, so there was a discussion between the various kinds of bhakti movements in India and the bhakti poets. And one of the arguments that one of the authors was making is that even the bhakti movement want liberation, even the Mayavadis want liberation. And therefore, they were talking about a poet who is actually following Mayavada tradition, but he's glorifying Lord Rama in different places. So should we consider him to be a bhakti poet or not to consider him to be a bhakti poet? So the argument that they put forward is that the bhakti yogis also want liberation, the Mayavadis also want liberation, and therefore his appreciating Lord Rama is also same as him, the other bhakti poets appreciating Lord Rama. But actually, the person who is appreciating Lord Rama is not appreciating the Lord Rama in a subordinate position. He is, although glorifying Lord, he is glorifying the Lord in a different idea of being, I am also God, he is also God. So this so-called Mayavadis sometimes appear that they are also performing certain religious activities. Or there may be even certain so-called Vaishnava groups, which are also kind of making other provision to accommodate other people and do some things. But it is important, by all these endeavors, one is not coming to understand one's real constitutional position as subordinate to the Supreme Lord. So, and therefore, this distinction that Prema Martha Mahan, actually, the Vaishnavas don't aspire for liberation. Actually, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's distinction that the love of God is the highest perfection of life is a very, very important point. For it distinguishes the so-called sometimes in the form of Mayavada, people may do certain activities and so on and so forth, or in different ways, people may say that I'm also doing liberation, you are also going for liberation, you all are same. No, it is not same. So this distinction between the highest perfection of life, as said by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, love of God, is very significant. Sometimes, if you do not understand this philosophy, then we are prone to be misguided by different people. And as we see, there are so many authors who have written on bhakti movements, which I've been reading in the class in the last week. They're all deluded by different things. It is not possible to understand because they do not come to understand their own constitutional position. They don't endeavor in the direction. So all kinds of misconceptions come. And therefore, Prabhupada is very clearly stating, unless one is reinstated in his own constitutional position, it is not possible to understand the Supreme Personality. So because the Lord is not an order carrier that I can make sense of him the way I want, or whatever I say is all correct. No, it is by his mercy that we come to understand him. It is by mercy of becoming a servant of pure devotee of the Lord that we can actually come to understand him. Without that, it's all speculation. And unless we do not understand that the Supreme Lord is the reservoir of all taste, all rasas, everyone is looking for some kind of rasa, some kind of mellow, some kind of taste. And usually we are all aware of the sensual pleasures by engaging our senses in different kinds. But one who is able to understand that the Supreme Lord is the source of all rasas, all taste, all mellows, all spiritual taste, is full of reservoir, full of spiritual bliss. As soon as one is able to understand by the mercy of the spiritual master and the Lord, then immediately understanding the greatness and the wonderful qualities, attributes of the Supreme Lord, is his transcendental reciprocation, as we can see in the case of he becomes a chariot driver, and he's willing to take the orders of Arjuna. It is said because sometimes Lord is so much overjoyed by the devotional service of his pure devotees that he finds it more blissful to take their orders sometimes. Although he is not to be bound by anything, but he relishes his transcendental reciprocation. So that Lord becomes accessible. He is willing to render service to his pure devotees, and pure devotees are more eager to render service unto him. So such wonderful qualities of the Lord, until we do not hear, we do not continuously hear the glories of the Lord again and again, we will not be enthused to render devotional service. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada has always emphasized on the Shravanam hearing, because by repeated hearing, as we see there are different verses, Nityam Shraddha, yes. So with faith and continuously, when we go on hearing about the Supreme Lord, then the Lord will be and let me just put up the pause. Srinvata Shraddhaya Nityam Krinitashta Svachestitam Kalena Adidhirghena Bhagavan Vishteriti. The persons who hear Srimad Bhagavatam regularly and are always taking the matter very seriously will have the personality of God Shri Krishna manifested in their hearts within a short time. So, by continuously hearing about the glories of the Lord, especially Srimad Bhagavatam, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommends Srimad Bhagavatam to be continuously heard. And Swachestam, that seriously by one's own endeavor. There has to be a serious endeavor. And if we constantly engage in hearing from the pure devotee of the Lord, the bona fide scriptures, Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, then it is said that very soon the Supreme Lord will be manifested in their hearts. And as soon as we understand the Supreme Lord, we will engage in the devotional service of the Lord with great determination. So unless that understanding does not come, we will not be enthused with great determination. And that will come in the association of the pure devotees, by taking to the desires of the pure devotees and trying to please the pure devotees. And by doing that, we get that mercy and we develop this taste to hear. Because a taste to hear, in order to develop, by which one can understand the Lord, one has to render devotional service to Seva, to a pure devotee of the Lord. And when we do that, and we progressively move forward to be reaching this platform of transcendental position or spiritual platform. I'll stop here and see if there are any questions or comments.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you for the class. Really, really nice. So this is something that I've been confused about for a long time. So if you can clear me out of my delusion that stems from being in this material world and the duality here, that'd be very nice. So it's clear to me what a sinful activity is. It's very clear in the scriptures if you go against them as a sinful activity. I was under the impression that a pious activity was, for example, someone like Martin Luther King, who has no knowledge of the supreme absolute truth, but on a bodily platform was doing, the best he could to be righteous, given the knowledge that he had. So I was under the impression that that was pious activity, and then transcendental activity were the activities that we do in Krishna consciousness that look normal but aren't, like cooking, cleaning, serving devotees, washing things. But in this verse, it seemed, and the way you were speaking, it seemed, you even said that religious activity was pious activity. So if you can clarify for me the difference between pious activity and transcendental activity, that would be very nice, because I don't really understand the difference. I always thought pious activity was like a +1 on your karma, sinful was a -1, and transcendental wasn't even on the board. It's something in a completely different platform. So that's my question for you. Thank you.
So, as we see in the purport that by rendering pious activities, one comes to a position to accept devotional service. So pious activities are a gateway to help us come closer to devotional service. But so in the other verse that we see that Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavita Matihi Priyatam Yati Kuto Api Labhyate Tatra Laulyam Api Mulyam Ekalam Janma Koti Sukrite Na Labhyate. So here it has been said Janma Koti Sukrite, which also means millions of births by performing pious activities. Even if one is having hundreds and thousands of lives performing pious activity, that does not necessarily mean that one can get pure devotional service in Krishna consciousness. So pious activities are activities which can be like charity, which can be like performing the various religious activities of karma kanda and things, or it could be also doing good to people. But they all may help the living entity come closer to the transcendental life, but they do not necessitate that they actually get devotional service. Does that help?
Yes, that helps. I understand pious activity is a gateway the transcendental activity.
So you're asking what pious
I guess I think maybe that's my problem. I'm trying to draw a line in the sand, and maybe that's just my dual mind.
Oh, yes. So I am not very sure exactly where the line is.
So actually, if you read the scriptures, especially Chaitanya Charitamrita, it says there is something called Bhakti Unmukha Sukruti. So this pious credit that is referred to in this verse is different from the material pious credit, which people do like opening a hospital or charity or anything of that sort. These are Bhakti Unmukha Sukruti. For example, when Narad Muni, he was trying to help those Bhakti Vedantists, it is done out of charity. I mean, he's trying to help in some way. But he was doing it to a pure devotee of the Lord. So when the devotee of the Lord is involved, that becomes pious credit. So you are accumulating sukrutis. So your papam, sinful activities have to come to a nil, full stop, and sukrutis also have to go up. Then bhajante mam dridha. Then it is possible to engage in devotional service with strong determination. Otherwise, not possible. Devotee is actually the thing. For example, let's say somebody comes to this temple and he has put the address in the GPS. Some reason the address was not correct. And he went around the temple 4 times, searching for that address. 4 times ignorantly, but he is circumambulating the temple. The pious credit goes up ignorantly.
No questions or comments, we'll stop here. Grantha Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki, Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada ki, Jai Gaur Premanandi. Thank you for joining.